The former Bush administration launched a war that most of the media ignored, and that was a war on whistleblowers. Unfortunately, President Obama has continued that war, and attorneys Howard Nation and Dave Tissell are with me now to talk about the continued assault on government whistleblowers. Howard, the Obama administration has done a miserable job where, if you think about this, they are actually going after whistleblowers, trying to prosecute whistleblowers for coming forward with information about government misconduct. I mean, the case that really strikes at you is where you had a CIA officer just recently get 30 months in prison because he publicly identified an intelligence operative that was engaged in the worst kind of illegal torture of prisoners. Now, rather than going after that person who was involved in the illegal conduct, they went after the whistleblower. That seems to be the brand of this Obama administration, is going after the wrong people all the time. What is your take on this? This is an infuriating story. Six times the Obama administration has done that, more than any administration in recent history.
Well, you're talking about the case of John Kiriakou, who was a counterterrorism agent operative for the CIA in Pakistan, and he had been successful in helping to bring down leadership of Al-Qaeda. He was very much opposed to to torture, and this was during a time when the Cheney-Bush administration was saying, we're not torturing, we're not torturing, we're not torturing. So he exposed the fact that there was torture, that it was waterboarding. He took it to journalists, and then he later wrote a book about it, showing that it was in fact a designed system of gathering information. It was not a few rogues. The result of that was the result of his disclosing their violations of the Constitution and their misconduct was that he is now serving 30 months in prison. It's outrageous.
So Dave, you actually saw Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, all of the big armaments industry, the arms dealers that have these huge government contracts. They're the ones pushing this administration to actually go after whistleblowers who are telling the truth about government squandering money. Tell me about the Trailblazer is a great example. The Trailblazer story, where you actually had, we know for a fact that approaching several $1 billion worth of money was simply squandered away on a system because you had a general, a fellow named Hayden, that had such a close relationship with private contractors that he blew it. He blew all this money on a system that didn't even work. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, this is absolutely extraordinary, Mike. The Trailblazer program was a program that really was a boondoggle that lost billions of dollars for the American taxpayer. And what we saw in 2001, at the very time that the chatter was leading up to 9/11, of there being a possible terrorist strike in the United States, was that we were learning or we did not know that Trailblazer was a new program that General Hayden had attempted to put into place to privatize, to give as a handout, basically to the big companies, to the McDonnell Douglases, to the Boeings of the world, and basically privatize our national security. And in doing that, leading up to 9/11, it left us without an ability to actually learn about all the chatter that was going on. And what we actually learned later is that Trailblazer was turned on the American public. And when this was disclosed by the NSA-4, I think is who we're talking about here today, a number of officials within the industry who exposed, in the government, who exposed that the Trailblazer program was not only a boondoggle in terms of losing money, but it actually didn't work. And
so Howard, let me go to you on that. Dave lays it out very well. You had a program that didn't work. You had a general that wanted to privatize what government is supposed to be doing, because in the end of the story, let me get to it, is General Hayden now is working as a private contractor for some of these very same people. But if you want to follow the money on this story, it's arguable that General Hayden's failure actually was part of the problem for the 9/11 disaster, because we had something called Thin Thread. Right. Thin Thread was a system that did work. Thin Thread was a system that we knew we were able to keep up with chatter. We were able to get in all of this information, these snippets from all over the world, process them quickly, and figure out what was going on. We could have picked up that chatter through Thin Thread, but instead you had General Hayden that wanted to reward his buddies, and he came forward with Trailblazer. Lay that out for us a little bit. Thin Thread, it was a system that was in place working, wasn't it?
This is a classic example of trying to reward outside contractors by replacing a system that is working. Thin Thread was the in-house system designed by NSA geniuses, really, and it was working beautifully. And the fact is that Thin Thread, as it was working, General Hayden came in and said, no, you know, we're going to change this thing over. We're going to stop using the system designed by in-house government workers that have been working forever and working highly effectively. We're going to replace it. We're going to outsource this, and we're going to bring up this new system called Trailblazer. Now, the problem with it was that at the time of the transition leading up to 9/11, there was nothing in place as a result of Hayden's decision. Hayden then put Trailblazer into place. The people who designed, the whistleblowers in this case, were the people who had designed and implemented and run Thin Thread successfully for years. They came forth and they said, this is not working, it's a boondoggle, there's corruption going on here in the bidding. And then they learned, just amazingly, that the NSA system had begun doing domestic spying, totally unconstitutional, that they had turned this Thin Thread system around and they had started using it against the American public.
Dave, let me go to you here. So all of a sudden, the people who want to do the right thing, these very talented, long experienced, great long history of successful scientific engineering on systems like this, they come forward and they say, wait a second. We want to report the fact that General Hayden, A, is a fool, B, might be involved in some type of relationship with the contractors that needs to be looked at. And instead of the Obama administration, instead of Eric Holder doing anything about that, they go after the whistleblowers, don't they? They go after the whistleblowers and they try to further this effort to privatize this system that in the past has been completely run by governments, very successfully, by the way.
This is absolutely correct, and this is what the travesty of this entire story is. None of these people, none of these four, have been prosecuted for leaking any confidential information, any information that is harmful to national security. What they've done is they are American truth tellers who are willing to come forward, who are willing to protect the American people at the expense of their own jobs, at the expense of their own careers. And they have been prosecuted in a way that has ruined their careers when the law would not allow them to be fired if they were in place. That is what is the travesty of what the Obama administration and Eric Holder has done in prosecuting more whistleblowers within the government than any president or administration before him.
Well, Howard, this is the only way we find out, isn't it? We only find out by way of whistleblowers. In this situation, what we found out was not only was there corruption, but the corruption might have led to the action to 9/11 by not catching the information that we could and should have caught prior to 9/11. This story seems to get worse in the sense that there is a movement by government to privatize, not by government, certainly by the neocon right, to privatize everything, whether it's education, whether it's our water systems, our air, you name it, they want to privatize it. Here, they simply want to privatize what government has done successfully for a long time, and it was a disaster, wasn't it?
Well, the Office of the Inspector General investigated this debacle, and they found that resources were wasted on Trailblazer in the billions of dollars. And interestingly, even the Office of the Inspector General kept it confidential as to how many billions were wasted on Trailblazer. They found that NSA had overlooked fraud and abuse, and they found that NSA had suppressed positive studies regarding thin thread, and that's NSA and General Hayden. The OIG found also that among the people at NSA now, that there was a fear of prosecution when they were even talking to the Inspector General who were investigating this, and they found that essentially the NSA had missed 911 as a result of this.
Dave, is there any question in your mind after taking a look at this story, General Hayden's relationship now to that private industry that does the very thing that he tried to launch? Now again, General Hayden was given the choice, do we go forward with a system that works? Do we use the technology and the technicians who came up with that system, that thin thread, that seems to work just fine? Or do we throw it out the window and go towards this movement to give this entire program to privatization? In a minute, tell me your quick take on it.
There is no question in my mind that although this was a huge failure for the American people, it was a big win for General Hayden and for his cronies, who made off very well.
Isn't this something the media just completely ignored? We're telling this story, but go back and find out how often our corporate media told this story, the people who take advertisement money from all these contractors.
Absolutely. The American people have to speak up because this story has been kept from them. And in fact, the Obama administration has been lumping the press with the spies through the 1917 Espionage Act, and basically saying that giving out information to the press is worse than actually selling secrets to the enemy.
Wow.
That letting the public actually know what's going on is worse than selling secrets to the enemy. This has to be stopped.
Well, we have to do it, and the only way we can do it is telling this story. Dave, Howard, thank you.
Thank you.